Welcome to our Posh podcast. I'm Gabrielle. I'm your host today, here with my co-hosts, my daughter Marcella.
Hello.
My son Gino.
Hello.
Our Puerto Rican amazing Bernie.
Hello.
Spider.
Hello.
And we welcome amazing guests today, Colleen Michaelis and James McClenahan. These two people right here are Tommy McClenahan's parents. Tommy McClenahan passed away on August 10th, 2018. At the age of 24 of an accidental drug overdose laced with fentanyl. This has hit very close to home for our family because Tommy was a boyfriend of a very close family friend. Nicolette Pianelli is basically like our daughter, sister to my children. And Colleen came on this podcast less than 3 months after Tommy passed away. And I remember this day so vividly because it was to date still the hardest interview I've ever done. I struggled so much that day because I was so afraid I was going to say anything wrong or I was going to just do something wrong. And it has to date always followed me of like, I want to do better. I want to do better for Tommy's memory. And I'm so glad that you guys are back and decided to come back because I know that you have made it a mission to help with this absolutely insane crisis that we have in this country with opioid deaths and what has happened.
Well, and I want to thank you. First of all, you were perfect last year. All of y'all were. And then second of all, you were the first to give me the opportunity to speak. And so I really appreciated that.
It was amazing.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I get chills right away again because it just was so brave of you. I don't even know how you did it because I don't even know how you get out of bed every day.
Yeah.
So, and today we have the honor of having Tommy's dad with us, James, this is the first time meeting you, but I feel like I know you because I've followed you throughout the course of this, and Nicolette has told me how amazing you are and have been also with her. As she also grieves because that was a very close person to her. And I wanted to take this first hour to get to retell Tommy's story from a dad's point of view because I think that that's very important as well. We got Colleen's story as the mom's point of view, but I think dads have a different view of it sometimes, and I think it's important to hear. If you would please give us the honor to tell us about your son and from when he was little, whatever you would like to say about him.
Okay, well, first, thanks for having me. Tommy was just one of those really special people. He was seemingly good at anything he tried. I think about the first time, we were living in Dallas at the time, and we went to California. We went to Huntington Beach, and I'd hired a young guy, a surfer out there from a surf shop to take he and Ben out.
How old is he at this time?
He was probably eight, something like that. And so they, cold kind of Southern California morning, they're out surfing, and I'm freezing on the beach. And when they came off, the kids were dragging their boards up, and the guy walked up to me and he said, if you guys lived here, he pointed at Tommy, he said that guy would make money at the sport.
Wow. First time?
Wow, that's cool.
And he was just one of those guys, he was like skateboarding, instantly he's great. Football, instantly he's great. Lacrosse, and I think you guys covered some of that. He was a terrific lacrosse player. Anything having to do with sort of hand-eye coordination. And then at the same time, he was really from an early age, he had an ability to really connect with people. And he, was very unjudgmental of people. He connected with everybody and always seemed to be careful to, if someone was kind of an outlier in a group, pull them in. And so, like I said, he was one of those special people that he always seemed to, and I always felt he would, no matter what happened, kind of land on his feet. It's like you could throw him from whenever and he was going to, land. And so, when that day happened, you always, going through what we went through, you always know there's a chance of something bad, really tremendously bad, like that happening. At the same time, I never thought with him it would happen. I always thought he would beat the disease. And frankly, kind of months up into that point, it was all indications were that he was beating the disease.
Now, you as the dad, when was the first time that you noticed maybe that there was something going on?
Boy, that's a good question. Probably kind of early high school time. But again, I think, and this, I don't know the right word, I guess, guilt, not really understanding how powerful, and how addictive these opioids were. I probably didn't focus on it enough. I thought, okay, he's, smoking pot or something like that. Well, I did that, and almost everyone I know did that. But it was probably that, maybe 10th grade.
Well, I mean, Tommy told me, he was always very honest. He told me the first time he smoked pot he was 15. That was the end of 9th grade. And, I think before opiates, there was a issue with senior year with Xanax. And, I think that one thing that you said earlier about him landing on his feet, I think Tommy had so much greatness surrounding him. He had a great grade point average. He got along with teachers, even though he drove some of them crazy, but in a funny way. He got along with all different friend groups and everything. And as parents, you allow some of that greatness to cloud your vision of what's going on over here because you're like, he's going to stop being an idiot soon. And the greatness is going to
take over.
Yes, it's going to take over. And so yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
My husband says it all the time too. He says, what you just said, a lot of people smoke pot in their early years and they get out of it and it's not a big deal, but it's been everything is so much more powerful and no one has, I guess you didn't either. And like you said, there's guilt, but at the same time, you only know what you know.
Well, the problem too is in addition to prescription medication,
right,
all drugs are being laced, on the street with fentanyl,
yes,
or at least with OxyContin or some form of an opiate. And because drug dealers know that that's going to bring the customer back. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't even realize that that's what's in, that their Xanax bars are laced with it, or, something they take at a party, is laced with it. And so that's the scary part too.
Right.
And that is a new thing, correct?
Yeah, that's relatively new.
Relatively new.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, the fentanyl, issue has, that is just so deadly. And there was even this morning I was watching CNBC and, the whole trade war between the U.S. and China. They were making the point today that the U.S. is at the point where a condition of moving forward on either relieving the tariffs or any of that kind of stuff is on China stopping exporting fentanyl here. And
really?
They believe, we believe that they can do that. And they've said it now for over a year that the Chinese government has said they would stop.
It's coming over from China and coming in via Mexico or mostly the West Coast. But it's definitely the majority of it's coming from China, which is interesting to me because if you were going to have like a Cold War and you were going to wipe out a generation,
I didn't
I'm not going to get too political on it, but
kidding.
But it's true, and they keep trying to. They say they're shutting down these manufacturers, and they're really not. They shut down and then they move somewhere else. Shut down, move somewhere else, and it's coming in via airplane, ship, and via large tractor trailers. From Mexico.
And what is fentanyl for? Like, what was it mainly?
Mainly for term, there's definitely a medical use for it. Okay. It's for like very terminally ill cancer patients.
Okay.
There's something called a fentanyl patch, and that can like give small doses of fentanyl. But, you know, it's 50 times stronger than heroin. It's a synthetic opiate, and literally like 2 little grams or 2 little grains of salt can kill a man.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's very, very powerful. And like I described last year, you know, when somebody's mixing, we talked about the chocolate chip cookies.
It helped me understand it so much when you did that.
Because when it's not being medically manufactured by pharmaceutical companies and it's being manufactured by someone in their kitchen, they're mixing it up with whatever they're mixing it up with. And then when you think about chocolate chip cookies and, you know, you get to the end of the batch of chocolate chip cookies and there's a bunch of chocolate chips left. So the last 5 cookies get more chocolate chips. You know, there's no scientific way to judge how much fentanyl is in whatever it is, the dose of heroin or in the OxyContin pill or the Xanax bars or whatever. Yeah.
Man, I had no idea. I feel like I'm at least pretty knowledgeable, not from experience now, but just feel like I've been around that kind of scene for so long. That is eye-opening. I had no idea. That's crazy. And I think the thing is I would imagine that most who are even playing around now in that playground, whatever, has no
clue
idea of the danger of what's in this easy drug or this playful drug or this drug just for the evening they want to let loose. That's intense.
Yeah.
Very.
It is very, and that's why we're so glad you're here, because you have made it your mission to get this the word out, to have people aware, to help other parents. You're raising a young boy right there. I mean, it's like I'll have awareness of what is really out there. It's not just smoking pot anymore. It's not just taking Xanax to relax or whatever. I mean, it is deadly. Yeah. This stuff is unbelievable. It's killing people.
And people are so, I mean, young adults, we'll call them that, are so much more easily influenced by peer pressures. We've always heard that for years, peer pressure. And, you know, you're right. You just pointed at it. It makes me think I can control him now because he's 8. Eventually, I'm not going to be able to control him. Because eventually, he's going to kind of go into his own deal.
But if you're aware and if you know, it's like when you don't know, you only know what you know. You can't fight that. So
it's crazy.
James, take us. So you were thinking there was something, maybe you were smoking pot, maybe whatever.
But yeah, just through that process. And then, you know, as he got older, you know, there were a couple injuries. There was a lacrosse injury, and, you know, he was going to a chiropractor and things like that to he'd hurt his kind of hip and back. But then he was, you know, prescribed opioids. And again, dumb me, I thought, well, if a doctor prescribes it, it's fine.
Yeah. Stay ahead of the pain. Stay ahead of the pain.
Right. And again, he was, you know, a tremendous athlete. And so, you know, watching him play, do all that, you thought, well, this is kind of the right, you know, the right thing, all of that kind of stuff. And ultimately, and I think we've certainly, Colleen and I have learned through this, but I think the country's now learning, because it's just such an epidemic, that those drugs are so powerfully addictive that once that happens, they kind of have you. And I think from there is where, and then once you can't get it through a legal source, you know, you go source it somewhere else, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's what Tommy was doing at that point. And again, he was always, even through that, you know, he always looked sharp. He always, you know, was kind of clear-eyed. He was very articulate. And because, you know, we were sort of on it at one point and trying to be on it. And so, you know, you check him when he comes in and you do all that kind of stuff. It just, it didn't seem like, and he wasn't, you know, my thought was that some of his conduct or his appearance would deteriorate, you know, and that wasn't happening. And so
we still had our computers and TVs, and, you know, aside from saying I need money to go eat, you know, and that's a form of, I guess, stealing, you know, if you're not really using it to go eat. But I mean, we didn't have like these instances where, you know,
like you're missing stuff out of the house.
Right.
That says a lot about what we're dealing with today in society. A lot of functional addicts,
2.5 million people are addicted to opiates.
And no one
Wow.
2.5 million people.
And now, when I say that, I don't mean that everybody's on the street getting heroin. I'm talking about but addicted to, legitimately to painkillers and opiates. And, it can happen in 3 days. And a lot of times people say, oh, yeah, when I had that surgery and 4 days later I stopped taking the medicine, I felt so nauseous. Well, that's your body's like detoxing already. So
3 days.
3 days.
So
Wow.
And it rewires your brain. We talked about this.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
Do you think his personality changed ever at all, or no?
Certainly at times, he would, and this is as he went deeper into it, there were times where he would be argumentative. Now he always had a certain amount of, he would challenge anybody. There was no conversation and no topic that he wasn't willing to jump in on. And, I would say to him, I said, you might be a little outgunned with your grandfather who was a Navy pilot. You're going to take him on this topic.
Right.
But he was happy to. And he was, a very confident guy. But as there would be times where he would be really irritable and moody, and it went back and forth. But a lot of that,
But you're
I'm really
catching
irritable,
it.
right?
Yeah, but you're not catching it.
And you're
Your
thinking
son's
he's
having
a
a moment
teen.
at that time,
Right.
right?
Teenager.
He's a teenager.
Right.
So and you kind of go, okay.
he was really good also at having a moment. Like, he didn't go slam himself and slam his door and stay in his room for 2 days. He was really good at having a moment and coming down within 30 minutes and going, Mom, I love you so much, la, 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 and giving me a big hug and all that.
So that is even harder to then pinpoint, because if someone locks themselves in a room and dark blinds and whatever, then you kind of go, but if he does that, then how are you supposed to know?
Right.
You think, oh, he just had a bad moment,
Yeah.
And then I think, part of the thing with him too, having always been, kind of a leader in the group and all that, I think he got to a point where he knew he needed help. It was hard for him to ask for it. And in the end, that's probably was the ultimate demise for him, because he finally came to us and said, look, I really, I'm trying, I'm trying to wean myself off this and I can't do it.
That's really brave of him to do that.
Yeah. And it absolutely was. And we went, and I think it's getting better and better. All the research-based treatment facilities are more and more coming online. I think, between technology and artificial intelligence, and then just the amount of caseloads that they have, it's got to be improving rapidly. But, we looked at and interviewed and talked to and, all sorts of facilities. And, it's difficult because you don't know what you don't know. You're listening to all these people who they can't really offer, here's the proof of how this works or what it's going to be. We were frankly lucky, when we found Recovery Unplugged, we went down and talked to them. And it was really at that point Tommy's decision, where, which facility he was going to go.
How old is he at this point?
He's 23, right? Or
when he went there?
He first went when he was 19. I think the issue then was Xanax. And don't you think? Yeah. And, that was to a very fancy place, and it costs a lot of money right outside of Dallas. Excuse me.
Can you tell us, just because people need to know, how much, for how long, how much do they charge?
Well, that was $1,000 a day.
That was rough. Yeah, $1,000 a day plus
for 90 days.
90 days. So
no, it was 58 days. 58 is how many days he was there.
So that's
and then there were other
$58,000.
Right, and then there were other
costs like
treatments
that cost extra,
and testing. Like that extra testing was.
So if you don't have that, how could you even?
Do insurance cover
begin?
that at all, or
no,
very little? And I think some of the facilities work with insurance companies. Most don't, because they don't want the battle of going to it. And the insurance companies, at least our experience, they tend to try to tell you and the doctors what's needed. It's interesting. I don't want to get into trouble here, but I have letters from the insurance company saying, okay, we're done paying for the treatment. That doesn't mean he doesn't need more treatment. And it was just such a frustrating approach that, frankly, they probably did do it a little bit. I just finally said, forget it. I'm not even dealing with, whatever it costs, that's what it costs. And, I don't have time to keep getting so frustrated battling you guys over what you're going to pay and what you're not going to pay.
So quick question. So at the time that your son comes to you and expresses like, I'm having issues, how many Xanax was he taking at that point daily?
I'm not sure how many he was taking. And, he had a friend who, we had attended his funeral, and we attended numerous funerals, unfortunately.
Same
even
thing?
before?
Same drug related, and we had attended this kid's funeral. It was in February, and it was right after that he came to, and again, Tommy looked like $1 million then,
Right.
and he came to us and said that he needed help. And so the place initially recommended outpatient. And I was like, there's no way he's going to go to outpatient. So we talked about that last time, about what happened when he had his arm and all that.
So
We talked about that last time.
Right.
So then, you go to this place, and as parents, I think one of the other big things, and I can't believe how much I've researched since, and I wasn't researching before. It's just insane.
You don't know better.
But
you don't know what to research. You don't know what to look for.
I think James
Right.
will agree with
Right.
this for sure, that you feel like as a parent, okay, I'm spending $1,000 a day. He's surrounded by all these amazing doctors, and that he's going to come out after the 58 days
And he's great.
and bring up and move on with his life and be fine, and you don't realize as a parent that it takes a lot more than that, and more aftercare and more counseling and more. I will say the one good thing that came out of that first place, the really good thing, was the three of us going to counseling. And I think that was really good for all three of us, probably. And, but you think they're going to be well after that. And, you don't realize, like, it is a disease, and like cancer, you can watch your kid go through all this treatment for cancer, but you don't know if in 6 months it's going to come back,
Well, and I think part of our problem too with it was, we all sort of suffer from the same thing.
Denial.
I think I can listen to somebody and I know what the deal is. And I think Colleen feels that way. Tommy feels that way. And so, people had told me, look, if it's an opioid deal, you're looking at least 6 months, to truly get, over the hump, and then, treatment for the rest of your life, really, therapy or whatever. And I thought, that doesn't sound right to me, and so you just look at it differently. And again, I think, Recovery Unplugged, the thing, there were a number of things that I really liked about what they did. And
This was in Austin?
This was in Austin. And, one of it was they sort of explained the whole process. They were saying, look, it's sort of, at this point for him, it's at least, a month, in residential treatment. But then from there, it's sober living, and, and so they had a whole process outlined kind of all the way through. And, the people were, they were so committed, at one point, when the insurance had sort of stopped and I was talking to them, they were on the same page that I was. They were saying, look, we'll figure, and I said, look, money's not going to be we'll do, I'll figure out a way to get the money to pay for this. That's not the issue. But they were at the same time saying, look, we'll figure out a way to, we're not going to kick him out of treatment if he needs it. So, but it's hard because and again, I think we've both done so much more research now, because I sort of thought, I thought I'd have it figured out. I also thought, like I'd said before, Tommy will always land on his feet. You put him on the top of the building upside down, he's going to land in a perfect athletic position, ready to go play basketball. It's so.
When he was in Austin, you as his dad, like, I just, as a parent myself, like, do you go to bed worrying every single day? Are you confident in his treatment and you don't worry? Like, how do you feel?
Well, it's interesting when, we drove down, thinking that we were going to interview. We'd already met with some places here. We drove down. A friend of mine had recommended Recovery Unplugged. We drove down there, and when we toured it, met the people, and it was really Tommy. He turned to me and said that this is the place. Mm-hmm. And so they have their own detox facility kind of across town. So we went straight there, and then he was in detox for a week or so, and then into the residential deal. While he was in the residential deal, you worry, but he's in a safe place. And so it's different than when he's away at college or he's just, out and about. So for that period of time, and there's very little contact, right? They can call. Like,
they earn the ability to call,
right,
like on Saturday afternoon,
right? And so then, but when he got,
can you call and ask how he's doing?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But can't talk to him.
Okay.
And
yeah.
There's no internet, no TV, no, access to anything like that.
Yeah. And so, but then when he's out from there, kind of to your question about worrying, we sort of had a thing where I would you don't want to be, and that's the thing, you don't be the helicopter parent or whatever the new what is they're calling it. It's even
right.
more. But, you want to check in, and so I would text him, in the morning and just, say, what up or whatever. And, he was always good about, I think he knew it's like, hey, mom and dad are worried.
Yeah.
And so he would respond back and say, I'm doing da 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 da. If I didn't hear from him in a couple hours or whatever, I would start ramping up the worry. And then I'd call Colleen, hey, have you talked to Tommy? I'd call Tommy's brother, hey, have you talked to Tommy? And then, you'd get it. But yeah, you worry then at that point, because I think at that point you sort of learn how fragile it is. And, I constantly went back and forth between, boy, I'm really, I'm worried, and then back to, he always lands on his feet,
he got this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you take us to that day?
Yeah. But Colleen knows this too. I'm a little bit of a crier. So, but
it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm a crier too. Sorry. I'll cry with you.
So I was at my college roommate's house on the Carolina coast at the beach. And
were you there on vacation?
Yeah. And so we were hanging out on the beach, and I had talked to Tommy. I had talked to Tommy the night before, kind of late evening, kind of 6 o'clock East Coast time, 5 o'clock here.
Is he still in treatment at this time?
He was in treatment, but he'd been in his own. He was renting a house with a good friend of his who was a roommate, and I knew that she'd gone on vacation, so Tommy was there alone, and so I checked in with him the day before, and then the next day, I sent him a note in the morning, didn't hear anything, another one, and as the day started going, I remember, we were sitting on the beach, and at that point too, this good Chip Rosenberg is this person, and I couldn't be closer with anybody than I am with him, but I didn't even give him, he didn't know the full extent.
This is your best friend.
Right. And he didn't know the full extent of what Tommy was going through. So, I was kind of, casually on the beach, continuing to check, and then I'd check with Colleen. And
I was doing the same thing. I was text messaging Tommy, and he always knew, every morning, and he always would get back, hey, Mom, love you too, or I'm headed to a meeting or whatever, always, always, always. And so I was also getting worried, but it was our convocation, our, big culmination of trainings for teachers, it was on that day. And so I was busy in the morning, but then I tried to call him at noon and he didn't answer.
Yeah. And so, I didn't know a lot of the people that were in that community with him down there. I knew his roommate, Ari. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, have you talked to Tommy today? And she was in Colorado or somewhere.
This was like at 3:30.
Yeah. And so
all day, nothing.
Yeah.
Neither of you.
Yeah. And we're both
starting to panic a little bit.
I mean, I was panicking by the afternoon. James called me at about 3:00. I think I was still at school. I said, I'm about to leave school. And, we confirmed neither one of us had heard from him all day. And then you were like, I'm going to have to call Ari.
Yeah. And so I reached out to her and she had someone go over and, found him unresponsive, and they called the police. And then, kind of it was probably, I don't know, 6:00 or 7:00.
East Coast time.
Yeah. The person from Recovery Unplugged, Ann, called me, and, what do you say? I mean, it's just, Tommy's dead. And so as difficult as that was, then I had to call Colleen.
And he didn't, you know what he said? Do you remember what you said? You said you need to get, Angie and Cindy and Chris and whoever else over there. Anna from Recovery Unplugged is going to call you in about 20 minutes. And I said, well, what's going on? And you said, you couldn't say it. You said, it's just the worst possible outcome. And so I got them over. You were getting on a plane to go to Austin. Yeah. And anyway, and so she called me. Yeah.
So you couldn't even say it.
He couldn't even say it.
Yeah. Did you know when he said that? What the worst? I mean,
I was pretty sure. I got off the phone and screamed, and text messaged one friend and said, gather round. We have to circle the wagons. And so I several people got over before Anna called me, and I actually just put it on speaker because I couldn't.
Yeah.
But
and that's the other.
So you were all by yourself?
Well, I was
with
Chip and Deb at their house, and so I booked a flight to Austin, and of course from Wilmington, North Carolina to Austin, it's not like there's direct flights, right? And so, but I was able to get on a flight from Wilmington to Charlotte, and then Charlotte direct to Austin, and I got there about midnight that night.
How do you even do all that by yourself? Like you're getting on a plane and all that kind of stuff.
No kidding.
I tell you, the hard part is, like I had like a 2-hour or whatever layover in Charlotte, and on the plane, you're on the plane, you're sort of cut off from everybody, and your mind's just right. It's like, okay, I need to. Before it hits social media, which seems to happen so quickly, I've got to reach his younger brother,
right?
Our families and friends. And so you do that and then you get off. And I travel all the time, and I fly through Charlotte a lot. I literally went to the wrong, terminal and wrong gate when I landed. I mean, I just took off and I was on the phone talking to people, and I'm at B and I'm supposed to be at D, and so went over there, and you make those phone calls. You're really on autopilot at that point. You're in shock and you're not thinking very clearly, and that's where you're lucky to have good friends and a great family. So. When I landed in Austin, it was, it's like after midnight, and a friend here who I told, what was going on, he jumped in a car here in Dallas and drove to Austin
to meet you.
To meet me. And so when I got off the plane, I had a text saying, hey, I'm right outside,
Oh, wow.
Because at that point, I couldn't have the next day gone and done all the things without him there. And so, that was Aaron Barrick.
Yeah.
And Yeah.
As far as like the social media thing too, he called me, said, you're going to get a call in 20 minutes, and then got on an airplane. And I got the call from Anna. I mean, I want to say it was around 5:30-ish, our time. And within 10 minutes, like we're sitting there trying to formulate a plan for me to call Ben and tell his brother. And within like 10 minutes, one of my friends goes, holy shit, it's already on social media. R.I.P. Tommy McClenahan, and Tommy McClenahan, you're the greatest, and I will always love you. Well, it was two people, and they didn't mean to jump, but that's what people do, right? They jump the gun, and
that's our world today.
Yeah, so my friend got on with them and said, the family doesn't know yet, please. So they took down their posts, but I all of a sudden very quickly couldn't think about how I was going to tell people. I just had to tell people, and so. Yeah, you are on autopilot. And luckily, my brother, he was like, don't worry about it. I got it from here, the rest of the family and stuff. So we did have a ton of support from our family. And our town just rallied.
Coppell, Texas.
Yes, just rallied around us. I remember last time I didn't want to say the town because I didn't want to offend anybody. And now I'm so proud of all the things that Coppell has done. And I'm not saying it's just because of Tommy, but because of a series of events. And the fact, I'd like to think that me getting out there and speaking about it has opened up a lot of doors for people. But yeah, we have an amazing, amazing town. And we were very, very supported.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's kind of that, no one's crowding you, but you're not going it alone kind of thing. And that was both, we have wonderful families and, great friends. So, and I don't know, people without that kind of support network, I don't know how you do, I don't know how they get through it. People who are, for whatever reason, somewhat isolated from their families and things like that. Impossible.
I think for that, it's also, when Colleen came on the show less than 3 months after it happened, I was like, my gosh, I don't even know how she gets out of bed every day. Yeah. And I feel like that is helpful though for you as well. And now what you're doing is you're teaching people. Like I feel strongly about it because I have Bernie next to me with a young son that now has information and knows what to look for. I feel like you have more education than you had when you came in here this morning. And
sure.
the way these drug dealers are, they're attacking kids younger and younger.
Yeah.
And it's they're trying to get them addicted younger and younger.
Well, the average age in Texas for alcohol and smoking experimentation is 11.
Wow.
That's the average age. And we talk about the drug
Can
dealers.
you say that again? Like
the average age,
insane.
Yeah, for alcohol and smoking experimentation is 11 years old and in Texas. So, we've got to be talking to kids way before them then and knowledge and arming them with knowledge. But one other thing I was going to say, it's not just the big bad drug dealers. It's, it's like getting prescriptions from doctors and not understanding that a kid doesn't need hydrocodone to get their wisdom teeth out. A kid doesn't need hydrocodone because they have to reset their elbow from a sports injury. They really don't. And those temporary pains usually last 2 to 3 days, and you can get through that with Tylenol or Advil or whatever. You don't need these big major pain medications. And, the research has shown also, I read a big article recently about how kids that have been given those drugs throughout their lives, for one reason or another, like suppose your son broke his arm and he got hydrocodone for a couple days, and then maybe he had surgery for something and he got something else, and then a sports injury in high school. Well, it's under your roof, right? So you're kind of in control of how much he takes and stuff. Well, what happened with Tommy is he was prescribed 90 pills, 3 refills, 90 pills at Ole Miss for a wakeboarding accident. And that was the beginning of the end. He had already had some issues. But
what kind of pills was it?
Hydrocodone. And yeah, and so, it's not just the big bad drug dealers. It's also being very vigilant about what you're being prescribed.
But it's like James said, he went to the doctor, he gave him medication, and our society is trained. The doctors know the doctors know everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm European. So we are taught a little bit different than this American culture is taught. And I have always been a big believer, and I try to tell everyone, don't believe everything the doctors say. They are all, I don't care what people say if they get mad at me. They're all connected to the drug companies. If they write a prescription, they get a kickback. So they're going to, one thing, they want you to take those pills. That is something they want to do. There's also not enough control how much people get prescribed. They go to a different doctor, they get more. How are you supposed to know this as a parent?
Well,
you can't know.
I think we've gotten better. I mean, even just in the last year, there have been more restrictions and stuff put on it. But my point I was going to make a minute ago is that they have shown now that when kids have been given hydrocodone or opioids for one thing or another, that makes them like way more susceptible to addiction when they become adults. Just because
Even if they
the
weren't.
brain, the brain's gotten that
you told
little
us this last
that
time.
little taste, and you feed it that again, and then it's much easier to get addicted.
It's like with the ADHD medication, Adderall is like one molecule of cocaine. So then
methamphetamine, off
Yeah.
methamphetamine.
yeah. So then they're used to that. So what the whole that it's
Especially for young kids. I'm
Mhm.
always shocked that
Mhm.
you give kids such a intense, I feel like that's an intense drug, and they're young kids. I don't know. Their system,
but
I feel
it's
like.
because I mean, like we said, you go as a parent, you go to the doctor, they tell you this, and then you do it because you just don't know any better.
Yeah.
You don't want to fight that.
And the other part about it is, I feel like not nowadays, it's always been that we're typically not impacted by something until we're impacted by it, right? That's not my kid. That's and again, it goes like we were saying earlier. When we picture someone who's, now the image is changing a lot now, but I think in historical times, when we pictured someone who's been addicted to something, we picture a strung out, some guy who looks like
Under
they're
a bridge.
Right.
Exactly.
Picture
Yeah.
someone who's a rock star, badass athlete who has it together, looks like $1 million. They're just being their kid. And it's one of the things that I think I agree with both of you in the fact that we are becoming more aware because we're seeing the new signs and it's being highlighted very much, and especially, and I'll say this, I know they've already said it, but y'all's story is so brave that y'all are coming here talking about this because there are tons of people, that listen to this podcast and, that may be missing signs that you right now hearing what you guys are talking about are able to catch something and they may be able to change the outcome if they haven't heard you guys share your stories. So thank y'all so much for sharing this. And I also have an 8-year-old. My God, it definitely resonates more with me.
They also may be struggling themselves.
Yeah.
And you need to understand there is hope.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with opiates, though, there's not a gray area. It's a miracle or it's not. And with opiates, on average, it takes 8 years of relapsing, being sober, to get 1 full year of sobriety.
8 years.
8 years.
Wow, that is
And when
unbelievable.
that sounds like too much to handle for,
Well, yeah, and
it's very daunting.
It is, and that's why when Tommy had died at I guess the aftercare deal for Recovery Unplugged is called Encore, and they have these events monthly where someone's passed away that's in their community, and a number of people. What they do though, they have a reception there, and everyone comes and they kind of tell stories about the person. And so they invited me, and I went down for it. And I couldn't believe, there were probably, they said, normally we get about, 15 or 20 people that come to these, and there was probably 80 or 90 people crowded into this room, for Tommy. And they're all telling these stories. And I was just blown away by their strength. And at the same time, I felt so badly for, the obstacles that they were having to try to overcome,
So these are 80 people that are also in this program?
That were in the program, right. And at varying degrees,
Yeah,
may have been, through it, and the counselors and all those people. But, you see them there and you look around and it puts a real face on, you see, the Purdue company that has, produced all these opioids, and the Sackler family that's now being sued in every county in the country.
Yep.
Thank goodness. But you see these people that are there, and, they're all battling this disease. And I was just, I thought, how do they, every day get up and battle it? Because it's not a straight line to success, right? I mean, you have a couple great months and then you relapse or whatever. And so there's a lot of ups and downs through that process to get to the end. And they're doing it. And frankly, they ought to be celebrated, for their bravery and what they're doing to try to get through this. So.
Well, I think especially, because I think you hear it a lot when somebody is injured and it's not like they were doing, they're just partying like crazy all the time and really sometimes made these choices on their own. That's always really sad. And it's all awful. But I think especially when a doctor prescribes you something and you think you're doing the right thing, and then suddenly you're in this whirlwind of addiction and you don't even know how you got here.
I had a friend. I had a friend that played professional football. He's a lineman, and he would just 300 some odd pounds, constantly getting hit, constantly. And so, initially starts off as a script from the doc to help for your pain. Then he got to where he's doing 100+ pills a day, hydrocodone. Then he stayed in the league a little bit longer. This guy ended up becoming just a big mess, but it led from one thing to another, and it was a downward spiral. I mean, all the money in the world, was super successful, to where he ended up doing time for, it just led from one bad thing to another. But it all started out with this, I'm going to call it a gateway kind of drug, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of these drugs, they're looked at so innocent because it's not meth and heroin. You're talking hydrocodone. You're talking something that's prescribed from the doctor, and it must be okay. And it's such a crazy.
It is extremely
thing.
scary.
It's so scary.
Well, addiction makes good people do bad things.
Yeah, for sure.
It really does.
You said it last time, and you touched on it a little bit earlier. Do you think it changes the brain?
No, it does. It absolutely does. It changes, it rewires the brain into thinking that you need that drug just like you need food or water.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
and it's just a constant, and it does that through a variety of ways, just the chemical makeup changes, but also, if you're super hungry, you get lightheaded and your stomach hurts and you might feel dizzy or nauseous or whatever. You say your body's telling you, I have to eat. Well, with opiates, the initial detox is awful. It's like food poisoning times a bazillion. And, your body's just telling you, you need that drug, you need that drug, you need that drug. Well, you get through the initial detox, and then every once in a while, you're sent those messages again from your brain. And usually it's through anxiety or depression or,
Have a bad day.
and speaking poorly to yourself. You know how we all do that. But a lot of times it goes to, why am I even trying? What am I going to, and it's the disease speaking to you. So that's a huge struggle as well.
That this whole opioid addiction is a huge problem now in the with older people.
Yes.
Because they have been prescribed this for years. Like they go to the doctor for whatever reason, and then they are prescribed it over and over. And my mother-in-law actually just passed away a week and a half ago from the same thing.
Sorry.
And so it is reaching all age groups. It is not just our teenagers. It is everyone, every age, and that's why I'm so glad you guys are here, because you have so much information to help us understand it. And yes, that I know also that this year, since you were here last, a lot of changes have been made. And doctors actually don't prescribe pain pills right away anymore. That is amazing in itself, but it's still not enough. How do you tell your other son this? I mean, how that is a whole another, I can't even fathom. That's your other child. That's the brother. Like, who made that phone call?
I did. You were on the plane.
Okay.
I did. Yeah, I did. And I told him that you were on a plane. You had gotten him a flight back, like right the next morning or whatever. I think I did. Maybe you did, and I called him after.
Yeah, I think I may have called him walking through the airport real quick because I was just really worried that.
Because I feel like he didn't know when I told you about the social media hits.
Mhm.
I feel like he didn't know then. But it doesn't matter.
Case in point, you're in shock and you don't.
Yeah,
you know,
and you have
You
no
don't even
idea.
remember.
I think you remember how you feel, and you don't feel. It's awful, but a lot of the details get kind of blurred, and to your point, it really doesn't. It doesn't matter. I think with Ben, he always looked up to Tommy. Ben did whatever Tommy did, and so it sort of. Really for him, and I've thought about it. I have a younger brother, and I can't imagine how he processes all that and deals with it. And in a lot of ways, I think it's harder on him than anyone else on the planet. It's like
because he's watching his parents hurting too.
Well, that, and he also, I think we all know when we're kids, we all know that our parents aren't going to be with us, the rest of our lives. But we think our 3-year-old older brother is going to be, and so that's tough. I think Ben likewise has a lot of good friends that certainly helped him through it, and I think he probably seeing what Tommy went through, and especially the trying to get through treatment and just battling all the symptoms and the sickness and all of that stuff. I think for him, it's like, whoa, I'm not going anywhere near there, and trying any of that stuff. And so, I think probably, that's kept him kind of away from that because that's the other concern. It's like,
I was going to ask that.
You certainly, with that amount of stress and just pain that puts on him, you don't want him doing something, and
right.
Yeah, he's very health conscious and stuff, especially now. But and I agree with you. I think he probably saw and heard more than we did. And I know that Tommy had recently told me that Ben had become his role model rather than the other way around. That summer before he died, but Ben doesn't like this stuff at all. He doesn't understand. I mean, we're going to get him to shatterproof this year, which is a big step. But Ben's never liked to be the center of attention in any way, shape, or form anyway. But he especially is super protective of Tommy and doesn't like this attention. I don't think would rather not have the attention, and has definitely voiced that before to me especially, because this is the first time James has really done anything publicly. I've been out there all year.
You have been talking a lot, and there have been articles written, and I just think that is amazing, and especially in Coppell. That's that small suburban town that is just like so many other ones, not just Coppell. It's Plano. Right. It's all those that are looked upon so perfect. They have like you had said last time, they have the perfect city, they have the perfect families, they have the perfect everything, and it's so easy.
Tommy was the 8th drug-related death of a Coppell High School graduate in 2018.
8th
only.
That year.
And I'm sorry?
In 2018.
In 2018.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well, there were 2 more after that. So, it's Coppell itself, and like I said, they were graduates, and who knows what happens after they leave us. But, the superintendent said it doesn't matter what happens after they leave us. They're always part of our family, and what could we as a district been doing proactively to, is there anything we could have done to educate kids? And now we are, now we are,
yes.
I'm going from here to a social emotional wellness committee, and that was just set up last year, and so we are really, really trying hard to,
educate.
Well, to
help.
educate the kids about drugs, because when, you don't know what you don't know, right? And we go, just say no to drugs. And then they're put in a position and they don't know what to say. And so there's that. And then educating parents, and then just really trying to focus on kids' emotional wellness, and giving them good coping skills so that when they're faced with anxiety or pressure or depression or a breakup or whatever it is that they're faced with, they have healthier coping skills than just partying or doing drugs.
Wow. Thank you. I'm gonna just, I feel like in a way, Tommy is helping so many other people.
Like a legacy.
It's a
Definitely.
legacy for sure. And you are doing amazing things, and not just in Coppell. I think this is reaching way more beyond Coppell could ever. I mean, Coppell is a small city, but I think that your braveness, is that a word?
It is now.
Of always talking about it and getting it out there that this is a thing is just unbelievable.
Well, at first I was worried because I wasn't sure if I would get support because, it goes against kind of some of that perfect persona thing of all of it. But, in addition to getting support from people and people saying, thank you so much for what you're doing, thank you so much for getting out there, is that, on the flip side, it's not just supportive, like the community in our district is actually making changes, which
Right.
is like really cool. And again, that's not all on my shoulders, I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing that, but I do think that there was a little bit of a nudge, when I decided to start getting out there and speaking about it.
Well, if you think about it, right, Coppell is looked at like a South Lake. They're looked at like a
Plano.
Frisco, a Plano or something, right? Bad shit doesn't happen in these areas.
Mhm.
And I promise you, and I know I'm 100% sure you both would agree with me, and anyone would agree with me here, that, a lot of people are fearful it's almost this, you're opening yourself up to say, I have bad shit happening in my life. And it's like, you don't want people to know your stuff.
Right.
So the fact that you two can take a very tragic situation, and thank you for talking about it today for the first time. And, for what you're doing right now, you're helping other people who probably, I don't know if they'd say something or if they'd be too embarrassed to say something. And you're giving them a platform to be supported.
Well, and a lot of people have reached out to me, and I feel like when you go through any tragedy or hard time, that if you can use your experience and help others, then that's, you can make the most out of that tragedy. The hard thing about this one, though, is that there's no right answer. I wish I had a magic wand and I could say, yes, we went through this, we should have done that. That's what would have worked, but there's no. Wouldn't you agree? There's no...
Totally. But, to your point, I think, most communities don't want to, you don't want to put a bad light on what's going on. But I will say, and I think, a lot of it's Colleen's leadership, but, there are people like the superintendent of the school, Brad Hunt, who has been incredibly proactive from there, the principals and, so, those people really do need to be acknowledged because it's a pretty brave step, right? I mean, they got to get out there. And again, I think part of it is, this is one of those areas, like Colleen was just saying, there's no one solution, right? There's no one therapy that's going to work for everybody. Because if there was, this would be solved by now, right? I mean,
for sure.
We've had so many cases of addiction that science would have been able to figure that out. So it's so many ways to go, just like though communicating it to a very diverse community. And so, Brad in particular has, he's sent letters out to all the families, and I'm sure he's kind of, as he's writing it going, I don't know if this is 100% right. I don't know how to.
Can I interject for 1 second? Because I just want to tell you.
No, you may not.
well, I'm going to anyway.
I've learned that over time.
But anyway, as far as what Brad sent out last spring to all members of the community through his newsletter, The Informed, he said, we like to think in Coppell that we live in a bubble. Well, it's time to burst our bubble. If you think that our town does not have a drug issue, you are either living under a rock or severely misinformed.
Wow.
And, he went on to say what the district was doing going to be doing and what proactive steps and, all this kind of stuff. It was really, really, really good letter. And that was shortly after he had Rick Calvert come to our city. Rick Calvert is a federal prosecutor, federal drug enforcer, prosecutor, whatever. But he was an amazing speaker, and he spoke to all the students and teachers and community members and talked about this hotel. And we could get into that, but just the long and the short of it was, he was in your face almost about the fact that there were Coppell High School graduates had died at this hotel. Coppell High School graduates had been selling drugs out of that hotel. And when they raided the hotel, 80% of the license plates that they ran in the parking lot were registered to Coppell, Texas. So, so he was very, and I mean, for our district to bring in someone like that with that kind of information was huge. And so people really had to start going, wow, this is going on. This is going on, and we need to do something about it. So,
wow. Well, I want to end this show on that note and in memory of Tommy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you coming on. And
Thank you.
We're going to do a second hour and talk about all that has been done, that is going on, Shadowproof, all the amazing things that are happening that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.